the televised version. So may I begin with any apologies for absence? I have Wojciech, Pluszczuk. Yes. Anybody else? Anyone else? No, that's lovely, thank you. So we've got minutes of the last meetings held on Tuesday the 17th of August and again on Wednesday the 25th of August. If there's no objections, I'll sign those after this meeting. Then we move on to disclosure of members' interest. Does anyone have any interest to declare in the papers that we're looking at this morning, please? No. I can't see any hands. So we then move on to the Northumberland line. And I'm going to ask the Interim Executive Director of Local Services and Regeneration to speak to this. But before I do, I'll just simply say that Wojciech can't be here today, but he's on a well-deserved week's break. But this is a really exciting paper that you have before you and demonstrates that the Northumberland line is really up and running now. And it's a very fantastic achievement and a very fantastic opportunity for both Northumberland and the rest of the region. So is that Rick O'Farrell that's going to speak to it? Yeah? Would you like to just say a few words on this, please?
Yes, good morning, Chair, good morning, members, and good morning to the public as well. The report before you has a package of recommendations relating to the Northumberland Line project. There are some financial recommendations relating to grants we've received from the central government and the reprofiling we need to do to reflect progress on the project. There is a recommendation that certain delegations be made to the head of paid service and myself when we need to sign urgent contracts. There is a specific recommendation relating to the various car parks which are being provided at the new stations. And that recommendation is that for the first 2 years, we do not charge for the car parking. I'll just reflect on why that is. There are two main reasons. The first is that we want to encourage people to use the new trains. It's what we call modal shift. So we don't want to deter them from driving to the car park by putting charges on. The second reason we don't want to charge for those car parks is that if we did so, there would be a chance that we would displace that parking into residential streets, and we don't want to impact on local residents. The final thing that the report seeks to do is to give members an update on the progress on the project. And progress has been significant, Chair. We have appointed Morgan Sindel as the main contractor for construction of the structures, that's the bridges and the new station platforms, etc. We have submitted the application for what is called the Transport and Works Act order, which is a statutory instrument which gives us the authority to make compulsory purchases where necessary, and we will try to avoid those at all costs. And the public inquiry for that starts in the second week in November. And we have submitted all but one of the planning applications for the actual new stations. Most of those will be considered in October and November. So very good progress on the project, Chair. Some technical recommendations there, and then the recommendation around the car parking. I'll just take any questions that members have, Chair.
Yeah, okay. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any questions around this? Yes, Councillor Watson.
I'm going to talk about the car park charges. I hear what you say, and what you're saying is that we want to encourage people to use the trains, and we don't want them to pay at the station, but so in case they park on the streets. So why have we got car parks at stations that we charge for at the moment? The problem I have is equanimity. You know, why can it not be the same for one station as it is for another? And we have several examples. I'm no expert by any means, but I believe you pay at Berwick, you certainly pay at Alnwick, however small it might be, and I know you pay at Morpeth. So what's the difference?
Chair, some of those stations, and I don't know the specifics, Councillor Watson, in every instance, some of those stations will be Network Rail stations, and Network Rail do charge. I'm not sure if they all are. I know that Morpeth is our car park and we charge there. Alnwick is ours, well, we charge there. I don't know the specifics. There is no essential difference except that they historically have always charged. We've always charged for those. Here we have 6 new stations, 5 new stations of a significant size, and we're trying to encourage a significant shift of people away from cars onto the train. So we feel that for 2 years we will monitor the situation closely, see what the car park usage is, and it could be that at the end of the 2 years we come back to Cabinet with a recommendation that we institute charging. We can have a separate discussion on those other car parks if you wish, Chair.
Richard, Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question, or I'm going to just make some comments really, Rick, I think on the question of car parking, because it's going to be one that we're going to have to watch and monitor quite carefully. I agree that we shouldn't be charging in the first instance, or certainly for the first couple of years, to make sure that we get things established. I think looking at a couple of the stations in particular, but actually it could be relevant for virtually all of them. If you imagine Ashington, for example, there's going to be a great temptation for people in the north of Morpeth to drive across to Ashington to benefit from free parking and a regular service rather than using Morpeth station where you have to pay. Similarly, for Cramlington, you have infrequent services, albeit this week we've welcomed news from TransPennine that we're going to have more stopping services in Cramlington, something that Cramlington councillors have been really keen to see happen, and the same for Morpeth. But again, what you could see in Seaton Delville, looking to Councillor Scott and his colleagues in Seaton Valley, we could see people from Cramlington choosing to go and park at Seaton Delville, choosing to go and park at Newsham or even Bebbside potentially. And so we're just going to have to watch it to make sure that we manage that demand properly and that we don't end up with a load of empty car parks on the East Coast just because we're not charging for them on the Northumberland line. So fully supportive of the position that we've outlined, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on it for in 2024, 2025 and see what the implications are of the decision that we've made.
We will be monitoring the position on all those car parks and the other car parks that you and Councillor Watson have mentioned from day one. We won't wait until the end of the 2-year period. And if something drastic seems to be happening after the end of the first year, well, then we'll bring something back to members then if we feel that we need to change the policy.
Yeah, thanks for that. We'll come back to that at the end. Councillor Riddle.
Yeah, just support. It's a great day, really. The fact that this has all gone through, it's fantastic. But I think that maybe we should consider just amending that part of the recommendation instead of tying ourselves to after 2 years. Just say that that we confer the proposal for station car parks to be free for an initial period rather than tie ourselves to 2 years. And then if we do have problems with displacement, etc., we can come back to it.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll come back to that as well. Catherine Seymour, and then Councillor
Yes,
Dunbar.
thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a great initiative to be brought back into service, so I welcome this. It's just on the Corporate Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. They mentioned that about the infrastructure, about the need to have integrated transport links to the new stations, including the creation of walking and cycling corridors, and the impact on housing. So I just hope that we can add this in. I would support that. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much.
Catherine, you read my mind. I was going to bring up the need for an integrated transport. I mean, not only for the Northumberland line, but for the East Coast main line. There's definitely a need for it. I mean, I think years ago, when I was an active member of the CPRA, I sort of lobbied for footpaths to go from the Cramlington estates to the railway station. So definitely, I think it's something that needs to be looked at, and that will alleviate the problems with the car parks and charging.
Thank you very much. That's good. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Chair. It was really just to reiterate some of the points. Firstly, I really do welcome this paper. As someone that grew up in South East Northumberland. You know, this was being talked about when I was still at school, which was some time ago now. So, you know, it's fantastic to see this come forward. And I must congratulate the officers involved, and particularly Stuart McNaughton, who I think has done a fantastic job over the past few years on this project. In terms of the car parking, you know, there's certainly something that, you know, as Councillor Wearmouth suggested, it's something that we need to keep an eye on. But obviously, you know, as a councillor who has a proposed station in my ward, you know, obviously I would like to see that, you know, that 2-year period or that interim period in place as the service gets up and running. I think it's very important that, you know, we don't, you know, have parking on the neighbouring streets, you know, not just in Seaton Delaval, but also in some of the other stations, particularly Bedlington I'm thinking about, and also Ashington, which are very much surrounded by residential areas. But, you know, overall, an absolutely superb development, and fantastic to be a part of it.
Yeah, good, thank you. So you, Councillor Watson.
I just come back and say thank you very much for the suggestion that we had for an initial period. If you change the wording to initial period, I'll vote for this recommendation. But I can't vote for it if we don't, because my experience is that people will park their cars where it's free, and they'll go on holiday, or they'll go for a weekend away, and they'll occupy those sites. That's exactly what we've had at other stations. And I think if we limit ourselves not to be flexible for 2 years, I think that would be a mistake. I will vote for this if we change it to initial period.
Yes, okay, thank you. Any other points or questions? Come back to Mr. O'Farrell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly reflect on what Councillor Dunbar and Councillor Seymour said about integrated systems. I think there's two things I'd want to mention. First, we will be bringing back to the Cabinet later this year the start of the consultation on the local cycling and walking improvement plans, and they will reflect the location of the new stations, etc. We are also working with partners in the region on the new bus partnerships, which the government initiative is forcing us down the line of. And as part of that, the North East Joint Transport Committee recently published the North East Travel Plan, and this places much emphasis on the integrated bus and train and other forms of public transport systems. So we will be pursuing the points that the two councillors made, Chair.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other questions, I pull those points together. You have referenced the £261,000 that we've allocated for this study of bus networks, as that is something that we definitely want to see progress on to improve public transport links in Northumberland. And the cycling and walking point has been brought up by the pre-scrutiny carried out by the scrutiny committee yesterday. And you are, again, alluding to the work that we are carrying out on that really important area. So it is important that we try to do everything we can to encourage cycling and walking as part of this new, very exciting project. I have to say that I agree with colleagues, and I think we should just review a little bit quicker than 2 years. So we could just say, confirm that station car parks will be free of charge, subject to a review, full stop. Would that suit everyone if we just did that? And then what we would be looking for, and if we could minute this, Karen, what we'd be looking for is a review to come back to Cabinet in, say, 12 months from the beginning of the operation, that would look at all station car parks, and not just the new ones as well, and to look at how much progress we've been able to make on public transport to and from the stations, and also cycling and walking network, and building an infrastructure to those stations as part of this brilliant project. So do we have a proposer for that? Proposed by Geoffrey Watson, seconded by Richard Wearmouth. So that's fine. So with that change, can I... and is that okay, Karen? Have you got that right? So with that, can I ask for a proposer of the recommendations, please, with that amendment? Proposed by Councillor Riddle, seconded by Councillor Wearmouth. Can you show by hands if you're all happy with that, subject to that amendment? Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. O'Farrell, for that. We then move on to the financial performance 21-22, I'm going to ask Councillor Wearmouth to give...
Have you missed B?
Sorry, have I missed one? I've missed one. I do
strategy,
beg your pardon. I just did that to check everybody was kind of listening. So we move on to number B now, which is the private sector housing strategy 21 to 23. I'm going to ask Councillor Horncastle, who's our cabinet member responsible, to give us an outline indication of where we are with this, and then I'll ask for an officer to take us through the report.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Right, private sector housing strategy. This is part of a bigger jigsaw of housing. I mean, one of the priorities of this administration is going to be quality housing for Northumberland, and especially on the affordable housing side. And there will be a few housing papers coming before the Cabinet soon, because, like I said, this is just part of a bigger jigsaw. Now, before I get onto this document, I just want to say that the leader did announce recently that we are ring-fencing an amount to push this affordable housing priority. It was a priority of the last administration, but due to COVID and other reasons, we didn't get where we wanted to be, but now that is the priority. So, this paper is, like it says, housing in the private sector. And that's not just for the rented accommodation, but this paper is about for people who actually, the owner-occupiers. And what it's about is really that everybody has a right, and it says in here on the link to the corporate plan, they have a right to a decent roof over your head. It's fundamental to health and well-being. And nobody should be forced to live on the streets or in a home that is a health hazard. And that's what this paper is about. So, it's been through scrutiny about a month ago and had long and detailed discussions about it. And the scrutiny meeting actually raised a few issues that we've talked about since, that there are some problem areas in Northumberland in the private sector that we've just had discussions this morning that we're going to try and look at what we can do with these problem areas. So, went through scrutiny. That was one of the concerns, and the scrutiny comments on the back page did actually relate to just one real problem area. It wasn't a county-wide problem. And the next thing that the scrutiny got onto is something that was probably maybe a bit premature, but it will be coming before this council look at soon, and that is the problem that this council is going to have, both in the public and the private sector, of having to meet government targets for green energy and things. And unfortunately, a lot of older houses are going to have problems because the new arrangements that will be in place when they deal with gas boilers and things for renewable energy does not fit too well in the older housing stock. And there will have to be an awful lot of money spent on housing to make these new initiatives work. So really, that's it. I mean, Julie Stewart will be here if she's got any technical questions. But like I say, what I would say, the recommendation is that the Cabinet approve this document. And like I say, we've been through it, and it's an excellent document.
Thank you very much. Can I ask an officer to give an overview, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the private sector housing strategy is a sub-strategy of the overarching housing strategy that we have, and it reflects the fact that the Council sets a high importance on working alongside the private sector as well as within social housing. It really builds upon the current housing strategy, which has three specific key areas, and around growing our community, supporting our residents and improving home and communities. Within that, the private sector housing strategy, we have identified 4 priorities that we feel are key to driving forward the work that we need to do. We have a really good relationship with a lot of private landlords in Northumberland, and they provide a key level of housing for us, and they support us really well. We want to work very closely with homeowners as well to help them and support them with the issues that Councillor Horncastle mentions. We did go through consultation. Everybody was very supportive of the objectives within there, and the plan is, if approved today, would then develop a delivery plan, which would then identify how we're going to work under each of those priorities, which we'd then be able to report back to scrutiny.
Lovely, thank you. Joan, do you want to add anything? Any questions then so I've got Councillor Riddle.
Can I just ask the officer, do we have a particular team that would tackle any sort of rogue landlords? Because, we've got lots of very good landlords, but we want to have one or two that maybe aren't playing by the book and could do with a little encouragement to put things right.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Riddle. We have a dedicated private sector housing team within the housing service who work very closely with the fraud team who sit within council tax and revenue and benefits. And we also work very closely with our environmental health colleagues. So we have a range of activities. We've got a dedicated empty homes working group at the minute, which is made up of officers from planning enforcement, as well as those of the services in public protection and housing, to try and have a coordinated approach to some of the more problematic properties and those landlords that prefer not to engage. So we have got a range of tools to look at. But what we are keen to do is develop that further. I think there are additional opportunities for us to do that, and certainly that's identified as one of the priorities within there to do that work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watson and then Councillor Wearmouth.
Just a technical question. Is a part owned, part bought by an individual classed as affordable housing or not? I mean, I'm thinking about the carbon homes who sell half, roughly I think half of the value of the house to. Is that affordable housing or not?
I think you're referring to shared ownership, Councillor Watson, and yes, it is actually determined as affordable housing under that, because what it does is it helps manage the outgoings of the individual by them owning part of it but also renting part of it. And so yes, it is seen as affordable, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry for my voice suffering a bit today. It was a really good document and a really interesting read. What I'm curious of is whether there's bolt-ons or other bits that are going to cover the questions that I have in this particular regard, which is some communities, and I do a lot of work with and have done with the various hubs in places like Blyth, Ashington, as well as Morpeth and Hexham and other places. It's not always, and this is very heavy on addressing issues, for example, with landlords. There's the other issue where you get real issues with some tenants, and that requires a lot of work with landlords to make really difficult decisions and take difficult action to ensure that there's a cohesive community. I don't see a lot of discussion in here about that, and yet that is something that is pretty fundamental for some people. And I won't name the estates because I don't think it's a particularly pleasant thing to do in a meeting. But there's one or two in particular where residents would say, point to the landlord and say it's not about the quality of the housing, it's not about the fact that that there isn't this insulation or that, it's the fact that it's getting used as a drug den or this or that or the other, and the antisocial behaviour that creates. So that's my first point. A second one is just and not necessarily one that we need to answer here, but just sort of highlighting that within the council's arm's length regeneration company, we have a lot of voids, particularly in the Hurst, and that's going to the approach that we have here, ultimately going up to potentially 400% in terms of council tax for void properties, is going to leave that company and the council in a funny cyclical nature of finding itself for not being able to fill those properties. Well, there needs to be a wider strategy, and I think that will emerge in the Hurst in due course. But I just feel it's important to note so that people understand that there's the problem there. And then previously, particularly when I've talked to Ashington councillors at the Ashington Forum, and it comes up in other places as well, I think Newcastle deploy it in terms of like a geographical catch-all for management of the private rented sector. And I know that Mr Soderquist previously not wanted to necessarily pursue that. Is that something that ultimately that we might end up looking at? And it may not be a fair question to officers, in which case feel free to bat it away and say that's a question for another day. Thank you.
Yes, please bat away freely. And I hope you got all of those points, but if necessary, Richard, you can always come back to them. Okay.
Thank you. So on point 1, I think that's sort of covered by priority 3, which is about providing advice and support and taking action where necessary for homeowners, landlords and tenants. What we're thinking there is we need to make sure that both tenants and landlords are aware of their responsibilities and how they should be behaving. If there's any issues around antisocial behaviour with the tenant, then certainly we can try to work with landlords to help support them and direct them. We're a fairly small team, so it may need inward investment and additional resource to do it the best way that we want to do. But I'm sure that's something that can be discussed depending on where our priorities sit within that. But we've recognised that that can be an issue and we do need to address that, certainly. With regard to Advance and the Hurst, I think there are some great ideas coming forward around that. I don't think it would be right to sort of go into that, but certainly we're working with Ashington Town Board to look at how we can do that and working with partners in that area, because you're absolutely right. I think it's not just that area, there are other areas as well that need sort of a more focused approach, but it's something that's been recognised and the work has already started on that. With regard to, I think you're referring to like a neighbourhood management maybe scheme or team. I'm not quite sure what Phil's views are on that, and I would hate to speak on his behalf, but I'm sure if, as things develop, depending on what we want to do with a specific area, that becomes the model that we want to follow, I'm sure it would be considered at that point.
That's really well battered away. Thank you very much. Do you want to come back on any of that?
I'll add in a supplemental question that's totally nothing to do with any of the original questions. Not that that ever happens at council meetings. So the final one maybe would be a little bit more of a planning focused one, which is that we're talking in here about affordable homes, and it's particularly challenging, and I'm half expecting Councillor Renner Thompson to jump in at some stage about it, about making sure in any subsequent iterations of the neighbourhood of the local plan or amendments to it, that we're getting to grips with some of that affordable housing in much smaller communities, and looking to Councillor Sanderson's ward, for example, there's a number of council houses long since bought under right to buy in Hepscott, you know, where that's happened over the course of successive decades, but it hasn't really been happening more recently.
Yeah, certainly affordable housing. I'll pass you on to Joan. She's probably best placed to answer that one.
Right, thank you, Councillor Weymouth. In terms of affordable housing, you've seen in the last couple of weeks there's been quite a lot in the press about, particularly on the coastal areas, about affordable housing, and then homes being sold on to second homes or to holiday homes. So, in terms of planning, we are limited on what we can do and can't do. So it's really about new homes coming forward. And we do it in the emerging local plan, and in some of the neighbourhood plans that are already made. We have policies in there which talks about protecting new houses in perpetuity to stay as a permanent occupancy and affordable homes if we can, if possible. So that's really what we're doing going forward. Like say, existing properties, we really struggle to control that. You can't do that through the planning legislation. I think the government have been talking about how you could do it through sort of other forms of legislation and looking at sort of the business rates relief type of thing, because as you're probably aware that sometimes if you have one property which is a holiday home, you can qualify for small business rates relief, which makes it quite attractive for some people to buy another property but then to turn it into a holiday let. In terms of the local plan going forward, we obviously have our affordable housing policy, which sets out different percentages for different value areas throughout Northumberland. And we have got in some smaller areas, particularly around on the coastal areas, the AONB, we have got a policy where we would require affordable housing on small sites rather than some of the larger sites. And that's largely because the legislation and the planning policy framework allows you to do that if you can demonstrate the need, and that's obviously what we've done through the local plan going forward.
Thank you very much. So as Councillor Wearmouth and Councillor Horncastle have said, affordable housing is going to be a priority for all of us in the council going forward. We do want to create a fund whereby we can actually really make progress. But as you've quite rightly said, it is easier said than done. But I think together, if we work as a team going forward on this, we will make progress over the next few years. So on this particular recommendation, the recommendation is to approve the content of the draft private sector housing strategy and agree its adoption. Is there a proposer for that? Proposed by Councillor Riddle, seconded by Councillor Wearmouth. Are you all in favour on that, please? Show. Okay, that's lovely. That's all unanimous. And thank you very much indeed. So now we move on to Appendix C, which is the financial performance 2021 to 22, the position at the end of June. And I'm going to ask Councillor Wearmouth to give us an introduction. And then I think we have a virtual Jan Willis who will join us at some stage. Yes, there she is. Good morning. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to spare my voice and not go through this in huge amounts of detail, because it is an incredibly detailed and factual report with lots of numbers in. The key points to note perhaps are the underspend in so far at the end of June of 1.9 million. We've got some reprofiling as a result of the capital programme, which if I draw your attention to point F in the recommendations, and one or two other things that are worthy of note in the report. But I think what I'll do is hand over to the ether and to Jan, who can maybe talk through in a way that only an experienced accountant and financial professional can. Jan.
Thank you, Councillor Wearmouth. So if I just elaborate a little bit on the recommendations. As you've already noted, projected underspend of just under £2 million as at the end of June. That's after taking account of the COVID grants that we've received to offset some of the COVID-related pressures, which are still continuing in the current financial year. There will no doubt be further COVID funding trickling in throughout the rest of the year, and we await further details, in particular about what's happening with the support for lost fees, sales and income from central government. Capital programme, yes, there has been some significant requirement for reprofiling, for the most part due to either delays in projects starting because of COVID, or because we have been awaiting details of central government grants for certain schemes, some of our larger regeneration schemes, and then of course there are it's not just about the general fund and the capital programme, it's also about keeping an eye on the housing revenue account, the treasury management activity, etc. And so the report details where we currently are with those things as well. Just one thing that I would draw members' attention to, if I can just take you to page, sorry, just bear with me a moment while I scroll down and find the right page. Sorry, it's one of the appendices that shows the savings position. It's page 15 of your agenda. You'll see that we still have some way to go in terms of delivering this year's budget savings. So as it is budget time at the moment and we're considering proposals for the forthcoming financial year, we will be taking a closer look at the delivery of the savings that were anticipated in this financial year. And as you'll see from the table on page 15, some of the services still have some way to go in terms of delivering those savings. So we'll provide further updates to Cabinet on that once we've completed that review. And that's all I wanted to say, Chair, by way of introduction, but happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Jan. Are there any questions? I'd like to draw members' attention to page 8, where you can see that despite all the difficulties that officers and sections of the council have faced over the last 12 to 18 months, we have still made really good progress in keeping, we haven't hit those savings targets yet, but I think it would be wrong of me not to say well done and thank you to the officers for doing the very best they can and achieving a great deal at times of great adversity. And actually, we've still invested 9 million in transport schemes, 6.5 million in school buildings, 2 million in fleet replacement, nearly 3 in leisure facilities, and nearly 2 in housing stock. So, you know, given everything, I think it's a fantastic effort. To end up where we are, I'm just simply say thank you very much to officers, and thank you to you as well, Jan, for your help in this.
Thank you, Leader.
Okay, any questions at all? No? Okay, well, may I take you to the recommendations? Would anybody like to propose those, please? Proposed by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Are you all in favour, please? Yeah, that's unanimous, so thank you very much indeed, and thank you again, Jan. So now we move on to the next one, which is Appendix D, which is the Seaton Valley Neighbourhood Plan. And I'll pass to Councillor Horncastle first, and then perhaps bring in Joan Sanderson. Councillor Horncastle.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, another neighbourhood plan. It's been completed, so quite a few now in the county, going back over the last, 6 or 7, 8 years, perhaps. This is the latest one for the Cabinet to accept. Seaton Valley. It's got 2 policies in it, which would be safeguarding green space and open space. It's been through all the procedures it needs to go through. And it just needs to be made by the council and taken on board, so it will become part of our statutory development plan, just like all the rest. So I would commend it to the Cabinet.
Thank you. Joan, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's really just to reiterate quite a lot of what Councillor Horncastle said. So basically was to say that the plan passed independent examination in May this year, and it went to a referendum on the 29th of July, and there was a majority vote in terms of using the neighbourhood plan as a policy tool in terms of planning decisions for the Seaton Valley parish area. And as Councillor Horncastle alluded to, you know, once we've passed referendum, we've got a majority vote. Under legislation, the council's now obliged to make the neighbourhood plan. He's also mentioned the fact that it's only a two policy plan, and a lot of that, and that's about designation of local green spaces and also designation of protected open space. When the neighbourhood plan group were actually doing the plan, they did quite a lot of evaluation work on what was coming out of the emerging local plan, and they decided that a lot of the policies in the emerging local plan covered what they wanted to do, but these were 2 key areas where they wanted to have some more local input into forming policies to protect open space in the Seaton Valley neighbourhood plan. And as Councillor Horncastle said, once it's made, it becomes part of the statutory development plan, and it is used to inform planning decisions within the parish. And I'll just add, in terms of the amount of neighbourhood plans we've actually got made at the moment, so if this plan is made today at Cabinet, that would be our 16th neighbourhood plan that we have formally made as a council. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Any questions on this? Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you. It's not a question, but just to say, especially earlier in the year, in the run up to the elections, I spent an awful lot of time in Seaton Valley, and what a beautiful place it is, and what a fantastic bit of work this is by everyone who comes together to make these local plans. From the officers' support, from the team and the planning team to guide people through, to all the people who provide many hours of their own time in order to go through this, to all of the people that come along and vote for them to make sure that they get a mandate locally as well. So a fantastic piece of work, and well done to everybody.
Good, thank you very much. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo what Councillor Wearmouth just said there. Certainly within Seaton Valley, you know, that there's an awful lot of green open space, and it's you know, it's pleasing to see that will be protected going forward. What I would say, and I think this applies to a lot of neighbourhood plans, you know, that they can be quite complicated to people who don't follow, you know, these types of things too closely. And I think what we've potentially got an opportunity here with this plan and potentially other plans is the next time, you know, the council magazine goes out, you know, can we feature, you know, the neighbourhood plans that have been made, including the Seaton Valley one, perhaps with an explanation, you know, for people who haven't followed it as closely as to actually what it means and what those benefits are. And I think that would, you know, that would be a good way to share the good work that's taking place.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I think that could be done. That's not a problem. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Any other points to make on this paper? Yes, Councillor Dunbar.
I welcome neighbourhood plans into the county's local plan. I think it gives the communities an opportunity to empower decision making within their areas, and with this one particularly, it's two policies to protect open green spaces and other areas. So yeah, I totally welcome and support it wholeheartedly.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for making that point. Right, so if there are no further questions, can I ask if there's a proposal for the recommendation? Proposed by Councillor Wearmouth, seconded by Councillor Renner-Thompson. Are we all in favour? Yeah, we look like we're unanimous again. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, officers, for attending. We now move on to number 8, which is the summary of new capital proposals considered by the Office of Capital Strategy Group. And we have Neil here this morning. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Yes, there are two proposals to Cabinet from the Capital Strategy Group this month, both related to the education portfolio. The first one is a request for a small contribution to a development at Kielder Observatory, which is quite an exciting development. They're looking to upgrade their radio astronomy equipment. The overall project is 161,000 that the observatory is looking to take forward, and they've approached the council for a contribution of 24,500 in relation to that. I mean, clearly the Kielder Astronomy is a leading astronomy outreach facility in the country, and this upgrades their equipment to a new level. It is particularly interesting from an educational perspective, as the upgrade will give the ability to access the equipment and to use it remotely, so you don't actually have to be on site for it. The link up with schools is that there's a projection that up to 10,000 pupils will be able to access this equipment remotely over the next 3 years, as well as physical visits to the site, which already take place and would continue. So clearly a significant educational benefit out of it, and it's been recommended through to Cabinet off the back of that. It will be met from the Strategic Regeneration Reserve, which is already within the medium-term financial plan. So there's no addition to the plan for that. It would be met from that funding source.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Riddle.
Yeah, as local member leader, you know, I want to extol the virtues of Kielder Observatory and the Dark Skies project. Actually, I mean, this was England's first dark sky designated area, and it's one of the largest dark skies areas in Europe, and it's actually at the very top of the tree in dark skies. It's the gold tier standard. You know, it's great for educational purposes, as is said in here. You know, the outreach will be fantastic, but it's also a very good tourist attraction, and it gets booked. You know, it's open almost every day of the year now, and that was never envisaged when it first started. So it's a great success story. Fully support the recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else? I suppose for myself, without wanting to sound slightly churlish, it's a fairly large organisation, the observatory, as I understand it. So what acknowledgement will the County Council get for this reasonably large sum of money? And secondly, can we get some sort of feedback on the way the project has gone and who it's benefited, and particularly, you know, around the number of young people and those from perhaps more deprived areas that may not normally have benefited from this? Will there be some sort of feedback on both those?
Yes, Chair. I mean, absolutely. In terms of feedback, we would expect the education team to follow up on that, you know, to make sure that the utilisation by the schools is happening as was projected, and that there is tangible benefit coming out of that. And certainly we can engage with the observatory on, you know, some sort of recognition of the council funding in there, whether that be via their website or advertising or whatever. But we can certainly look into that with them. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we probably maybe just wanted a bit more strong than that. So can we, without sort of wanting to mess up the recommendations, can we actually sort of really ask that we do definitely get an acknowledgement for this money?
We can put that into the funding agreement. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so with that, are you all in favour? Can I probably have someone to propose that recommendation, proposed by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Wearmouth? Are you all in favour? Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
And there is a second item on there which is relatively straightforward. The Horton Grange School in Blythe is very keen to upgrade their lighting technology to LED. They did put an application into the Public Sector Low Carbon Skills Fund, but they weren't successful in that. But they were still very keen to take the project forward, so they have applied for a Salex Energy Efficiency Loan, which is offered through the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and broadly is an interest-free loan that you pay back from the savings that you get from the more efficient technology. The business case stacks up for the school. They want to do it, and they're in a solid financial position to do it. Technically, the council does underwrite the risk of default on the loan, but we think that risk is very low in this case. The school has a good track record in terms of managing its funding, and therefore we're recommending that Cabinet support that. As I say, it's no cost to the council, but because it is a maintained school, we do have to take it through the council's capital scheme and put it into the council's budget in order for that to actually happen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Leader. Just to compliment the school really on actually going after this and doing something proactive and following really something that we're really keen, and I know you're really keen, Glenn, to see across the county in terms of driving down our carbon emissions and adopting new technology. It would have been very easy for them to just sit on their hands and do nothing, and to have taken the time to explore the various routes available to them is something that they should be commended for, and hopefully other schools and other institutions and so on follow suit, and more than happy to support it. It's an excellent idea.
Yeah, good. Any other points, questions? I think we'd all be very happy with this as a proposer. Proposed by Councillor Wearmouth, seconded by Councillor Watson. Are you all in favour? Yep. Thank you very much. We like that one very much, and wish it well. Okay, so thank you, Neil, for coming along today. That takes us to any urgent business. I don't have any. Does anybody have any urgent business? If not, we now move to a stage in the agenda where we will be discussing some sensitive commercial details and so on. So I'm going to have to ask if we can now move into private session. Before I do that, can I ask if there's a proposer for that motion? Proposed by Councillor Wearmouth, seconded by Councillor Patterson, that we move into closed session. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning.